Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, my name is Tom Hoover. This is Morgan Grinstead and Stephen Leather, and we're here from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. I'm going to talk for a minute and turn it over to the people that actually did it. So basically, as it says, from days to minutes, we've had this project going on for quite some time. I've been there for about 2.5 years, and I had heard several times before that the plan cut over to our new identity management had been scheduled, but kind of didn't happen. And then about 2 years ago, I went ahead and turned the project over to a gentleman named Tony Parsley, who brought in these two people to kind of basically take care of it, and basically owned it. And that's been it's been great. And I will let them go ahead and kind of tell the story of how they did it and what they did. So, Stephen.
Good. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes and talk concepts and philosophy, and then Morgan's going to talk a little bit more about the actual the project and some of the specifics of the technology, with the exception of one part, which I'll talk about, and then I'm going to come back and talk about our lessons learned. So IAM is consequential. Well, that says it right up there. One of the ways to think, the important ways to think about this is as two specific parts, identity management and access management. I'm kind of quoting from a book I've been talking about, a free ebook called Identity Management on a Shoestring by Ganesh Prasad. It's free up on infoq.com. And given that I'm really new to this kind of job, to enterprise IT, this book really helped me put a lot of things in context. He talks about specifically addressing identity management and access management. Identity management being the business logic and the mechanics of provisioning your users, your customers, into all of your applications. So coming from authoritative sources, systems such as Banner for many of us, or our student information system, or for many of us also a human resources system, SAP driven, taking those authoritative sources of our users, doing business processing on them, and then provisioning those users into appropriate downstream systems like Blackboard and email and any other applications that you have. So that is, in a nutshell, what the identity management part is. It's also the harder part. The access management is specifically password management and doing authentication, and to a degree authorization. So we've had CAS, JSIGs, and now Apereo's central authentication service up and running in production for about 18 months. And right now, we are getting to the point of we are migrating our portal, our university portal, and a lot of its functionality over to CAS. So that allows us to have a single place for the authentication, the access management, and some kind of attribute release, such as names, email addresses, into downstream applications. So to a degree, there's kind of overlap between those two. But from a functional and conceptual perspective, it's a good thing to keep them separate. I think that's so, and I think that addresses what's addressed in this slide. Next concept, it's a data problem, not a technical problem. So even if you're using, so we use a product for our identity management side. And so we have a product that has a particular data model, a particular programming model involved in it. But even if you use another product, if you use Novell, Microsoft, Oracle Identity Manager, or even to a degree, I don't know much about the outsourced world, but the identity management side especially, it's a data problem. So you have to, which puts it in the realm of the developer. So with the data, so my attributes, my names, my email addresses, in my student status, my employee status, all of those have to be passed through identity management so that we are making the correct decisions and say our identities get put in the appropriate applications. So if you have business rules that say employees get an employee email system, students get a student email system, if you're both, you get both email systems. That's the kind of processing you're doing and kind of the development, the rules that your IDM developer builds. So all the products, I know our product, being Novell, has a particular programming model, and I don't know much about the others, but no matter which product you use, there is going to be custom development, at least at the level of the product, because probably everybody in here has different particular rules for provisioning different target applications, for provisioning different rules for provisioning those applications, different bucket of target applications, and based on politics, history, accounting rules, all that kind of stuff. So this is very much a data problem. There is probably no such thing as dropping in an application and boom, or dropping in an identity management solution and not touching it ever again. So that puts it in, like I said, that puts it in the realm of the developer rather than, say, a systems administrator, because systems administrators work more at the managing an application level rather than at the data level. Now, I know there's lots of overlap and there's no clear-cutness between this, but that's how I conceptualize it. Another point, it's a forever service. It's also, and I think it's important to think of it as a service unto its own. We are fortunate to have, two developers, dedicated to this. So, all of our customers, being the application owners, the application administrators, they have, people who they can talk to bring on a new application, such it is. So it's important to conceptualize it as such, so you get a loose coupling between these things rather than having, working through and, always having to do, a custom. If you're doing file transfers, every file transfer is different for every application. It gives you a looser coupling and a modularity. It also makes these things repeatable. So next time, if we brought on 5 applications so far, then somebody else wants to bring on a new application, we already have a procedure or a process involved to bring on that new application. So we'll have a bucket of attributes that we're authorized to release to some downstream application if they need something specific, like a date of birth, which we don't necessarily want in downstream applications. We actually have a mechanism for dealing with that, which I'll talk about later. Overview, so Morgan's now going to talk about background and challenges, some more benefits to IAM at UTC, and then I'll also talk about one point in there, and then I'll come back with lessons learned. This is Morgan.
Morning. Let's see, when we got this project, we had done some IAM previously. It hadn't really been a foundation though. It was more, let's go ahead and get some of this that we're already getting from an authoritative source such as Banner and just process it once a day. Well, there's about 7 different timed once a day processes to get that information down. We had been doing it as a stopgap, and we wound up creating an undefined, non-scalable ad hoc process. We had a consultant inform us what that normally is termed as called an accidental architecture. It doesn't really have a well-based design to flow the data where you need to. Let's see here. We previously had been directly connected, and the only, well, not directly connected, a file transfer process connection from Banner to our Identity Vault. We wound up having a lot of manual touches to fix the data before it got created in that Identity Vault. Obviously, you can't really scale that. To utilize one of the big reasons this project got started is Banner made the decree they didn't want employees or affiliates in Banner anymore, which makes sense. It's not designed for Banner, it's designed for student data, not employees and affiliates. So about mid-August 2012, we came up with, we need to do this the right way, let's do it as a foundation. We actually received senior management buy-in, which was huge in having this project move successfully forward. We designed it so that everything is going to be hub and spoke. Identity Vault is going to be the center. Banner is no longer the center. That way we can incorporate that other identity authoritative source, which was our SAP instance for employees. So to give you an idea of where we started, we had a lovely time going to different areas and trying to discover how identities were created previously or at the current state before we got this project going. Don't have to see all the details, but to give you an idea, it took anywhere from 24 to 72 hours to get these identities created, and that's if everything went well, dependent on timings, dependent on batch runs, whether somebody got their information in before 1 o'clock or after 1:30. This was actually not as easy as it looked because no one person could tell us, here's how somebody gets created. We had to go and talk to several different departments, get pieces here, pieces there, pull it all together. But you have to know where you are in order to get forward and improve things. So some of the challenges we saw, onboarding process delays for pretty much all of our users. As a college, you don't want to tell somebody, oh, well, you're here, but you need to wait till tomorrow before you get email, or you need to wait till tomorrow before you can access your computer labs. People get really frustrated, especially when they can go to Google, create an account, and within 10 minutes have it ready to use. So we wound up having some very unhappy people call our help desk, and we just had to tell them, I'm sorry, the current process, you'll have to wait till tomorrow. They were not too happy. The other problem with the previous way was scalability. There was actually one specific person that would check every account that was supposed to be created that day, and she would have to fix minor data issues that came through. It's like, oh, well, this person's an affiliate, they're not supposed to get that. Let me change that before it actually processes through. So she was man in the middle between the authoritative source and our Identity Vault. As you can imagine, that doesn't scale when you go to hundreds of people a day. So it was a challenge. One of the other big challenges is deprovisioning. We've not done deprovisioning very well in the past. We're still working on deprovisioning now. We do have some things that will auto-deprovision based on statuses that come through Banner for students. Listservs will automatically get removed or added on an on-demand basis. Oh, sorry. Helps if you click the right area there. One other big thing was password management. When this project started, our password management used sensitive data for people to reset passwords. Social security numbers, date of births, things that somebody could be sitting over your shoulder or sitting next to you. And if they're paying attention, they can grab your identity and run with it. Open credit cards, ruin your credit history. So that was one of the big things we needed to do, was a self-service password reset that didn't use sensitive information. And to get an idea, we also needed a governance board. And the reason this was we didn't have a central authority to go to say, well, what is this person supposed to get? What should they not have access to? So we had to form a group of people that were invested in the identities and the resources to come together, discuss it, and decide, okay, affiliates only get access to labs or only get access to wireless. That way, the implementers are not the one making those decisions. We should just be implementing, not deciding policy. So to give you an idea, now that I'm actually ready for the slide, as with many, there are, for this one authoritative source for students, 9 different ways they can get entered. As you can imagine, different groups are responsible for different methods, and you end up with inconsistent and possibly bad data. One person enters it and they don't include a social security number. Another person doesn't include a date of birth, which means it makes it all that much harder to try and come back later and update that identity. So we had to kind of understand all the different ways it could get entered. then we moved on to, well, what can it improve in our current process? We saw an automation, removed a lot of the human error to get from our authoritative sources down to our identity vault, gave us consistent data, and the customer ends up with a better experience at the end because they know, okay, well, mine looks like the person's next to me, not, well, how come theirs is this way and mine's this way and theirs isn't, third person's a different way altogether. We got it to where it was near real time. No more delays of 24 to 72 hours. Now, as soon as somebody in Banner is approved and accepted, that gets created in our identity vault. They get created. Wireless access, lab access, all the stuff becomes instantly available within about 10 minutes. Or at least for some systems, about 10 minutes. The ones that we were able to do real time, it got us there a lot faster. It does depend on the connected system. For example, our swipe card system for our university identity cards still only wants batch processes. They can only run it so often. So we talked to them, said, well, how quickly can you do this? How frequently can you do this? So we worked out with them, and instead of doing once a day creations, we got about every 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes with them, which helped tremendously because that was one of the things we got calls on constantly was, hey, is this person set to get created today? Because they're down here waiting to see if they can get their MOX card so that they can go and buy meal plans and get food. Kind of hard to tell them, well, no, they're not here. Let me go see why. Now, if they're accepted, they'll get there within 10 minutes. We can, if there's an issue, resend them. If they're right there on the phone, within 15 minutes they have their card in hand. They don't have to be told, I'm sorry, we can't help you until tomorrow, please come back. What are they supposed to do? Just, well, let me see if somebody will buy me a biscuit in the meantime. They need that access a lot faster than what they were getting in, and identity management was able to deliver. Identity management also gave them a single point of control, one system for the user to go to and manage their identity. It used to be that before identity management came along, you'd have to go to Active Directory, set your password there. Well, that means your password over for the user directory was different now, and you had to go over there and set your password. Well, it also meant that your name, middle name in that directory may not be the same as Active Directory. It was real back and forth inconsistency. So one of the big things we mentioned earlier was the governance team. We went with a RACI model for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So there were a couple of layers. The top layer were those people that were responsible and accountable. They needed to have a say in the policy building. So they're the ones we made sure were represented from each of those functional areas. Records, Banner, Iris, which was our SAP instance for employees. They needed to have a say anytime there was an issue with identities. Yes, they need to have this. No, they don't. We also worked on global terminology. We would go to one department and say, well, what's an affiliate to you? They'd give us, oh, well, that's just somebody who comes on and they need to take a class on photography, but they don't really need lab access. Or there's a construction company working on campus. They need to be able to get into certain buildings with swipe cards, but they don't need Active Directory access. So we decided to try and come up with a global term so that everybody, when we say an affiliate, these is people that don't need full access, restricted access. That way everybody knew what we were talking about when we said it. Scalability. This was a big one for us. Scalability. We had a person, we've kind of jokingly called her a identity management system unto herself, named Brenda. She's the one that I mentioned earlier, would go through and check every single account. That's the person the MOX card office called every time, every day, to the point that memorized the number, knew it was going to happen about a certain time every day. But with enrollment on the rise, she couldn't manually touch all of those accounts anymore. It wasn't scalable, and as soon as we put identity management in it, she went from touching every account to only touching problem accounts. So if somebody had an issue, she could easily look it up, figure out the problem, correct it, and everything flowed properly. Let's see here. To give you an idea, I normally don't mention a specific product, but this gives you an idea. We use NetIQ's identity management. It has a hub and spoke architecture. The central identity vault manages policies, auditing, and reporting. It offers different types of connections. There's service connections, such as SOAP and scripting. directory connections like LDAP, Active Directory, and eDirectory. It also has enterprise connections for Banner, Google Apps, SAP, database connections, JDBC, Oracle. It's pretty much as flexible as you want it to be. As much as you can program in, at least with the version or the vendor we chose, you can write scripts, store it on a connected system, launch them using identity management. This is actually our new Identity Vault on the right. Our old one, we wound up migrating everything, so we can use it as an authentication source at that point, because it has all the information it needs for that usernames, passwords. The central one has more sensitive. It's a protected central resource. We don't want social security numbers in Active Directory. We don't want date of birth in CBORD. They just don't need it. And this gives a central space to where we can make decisions and provision on that information without actually exposing it to the connected systems. So let's see here. Student identities. Banner is our authoritative source for student identities. I'm guessing that's the same for several of you. We wound up in eliminating an old system that did identity provision. I think it was on campus for about 30 years. Once we got rid of that, email and computer access, once we connected directly to Banner, became nearly instant after acceptance. Students have been using the new Google accounts that we give them on provisioning rather quickly. We wound up getting calls before people arrived for orientation saying, well, how do I get access to this? As soon as we told them the default password for people, which uses information only they would know, they can get to their email before they even arrive on campus, which they actually really, really appreciated. Let's see here. Wireless access was also available very quickly, which is good because as we've seen more and more students bring their devices on campus and want to get in online as soon as they step foot. So we were provisioned into Active Directory, which was our authentication source for wireless. They get it as soon as they step on campus. Our MOX card is our university ID card, swipe card. That's also provisioned. It's not instant, but it is a much more frequent updated process to where it's within 15 minutes instead of within 24 hours. This was important, I mentioned earlier, because MOX card is how they purchase their student meal plans. That's a big one. Students enjoy eating, at least I've found. They also get automatically added to the appropriate listservs. We have a listserv for all students, and then we also have a specific listserv for graduate students. Once we got that information from the authoritative source, made the decision, automatically provision them. Once they're no longer a currently enrolled student, it'll deprovision them automatically from those listservs. Let's see here. Employee provisioning. There's a lot of the same benefits. This was more involved because it had more resources that we managed directly. This is where the title actually came from for this session, because previously from final approval in IRIS, which is our SAP instance, to getting access to resources and an identity card could take up to 72 hours, which that's if everything went well. If there was a problem, it could take a week or longer. People aren't real happy when they get to campus first day of work, they can't log into their desktop. So there was lots of lost productivity there. We wound up making it so that the provisioning went a lot faster. If we had a reported person of, oh no, they haven't been approved in IRIS, let's hurry up and get them approved. Well, within an hour, they can log into their desktop instead of, well, let's wait 2 or 3 days and then get you logged in. So 42 minutes was the total from final approval in IRIS to having all the connected system resources provisioned. That was big for us because we had lots of unhappy people on campus previously. Now they're much happier with, okay, I can get to everything. Okay, I can actually work the first day I get on campus. It made a big difference for us. Like I said, lots of the same benefits that students saw, wireless access. One difference is we provisioned Exchange accounts instead of Google accounts for employees. There's a specific listserv for employees. And they have all of the desktops for employees are connected to the Active Directory. Now, as soon as that person gets in, they log into the machine, everything's there. let's see here, that should be better. Other improvements, password self-service. We were able to, with this new Identity Vault, go from using sensitive information to a challenge set of questions and answers, some of which are administrator defined. We also gave them a user defined question. That way they can make up the question and answer to it, only they know. Which it's actually very flexible. You can choose how many of each you want from a pool of questions you define, or you can make it to where they have to define everything. It was very easy to set up. We actually now can enforce password policies as far as expiration, which we had to rely on a UT parent campus for that previously. It also built on the single place for people to manage their accounts. They go there, they change their password, it goes everywhere it needs to go. It goes to Active Directory, it goes to Google, which that was a big one that students enjoyed. Previously, Google was done in batch uploads, and an administrator had to set that password for the user by hand. So anytime they changed their password, it did not get sent to Google. So it was set once, very much administration heavy, used up a lot of time. As soon as we got it connected with the Identity Vault, anytime a student changes their password, it goes straight to Google. They don't have to call us if they need to change it. They lose their phone, they don't have to worry about somebody, oh no, my password's saved there, I don't remember what it is, I can't get in to change it. They don't have to call us, they can take care of it themselves. So it's a big weight off our shoulders and theirs. Let's see, the future. You can only be as good as the quality of data you provide. As mentioned, IAM is something ongoing, not a stop-finish, one-time project. We have more systems we want to connect to, such as shared drive access and Active Directory. That's one of our future projects. Students staying in dorms, getting automatic door access with our card swipes. There's always going to be more systems you're going to want to bring on board. Even if some of the old ones go away, there's only going to be more that come on board because it's going to be replaced with something. It's just the nature of the beast. We also wanted to work with our other campuses because there are some processes involved that we have to work with, say, our parent company in Knoxville, UT. We're actually working right now with them to get some ID reconciliation because we have a shared Active Directory forest. You can't have two people in two different domains at the same time. It causes issues. So we're working with them to try and develop a process to eliminate those duplicates before they get formed. That way there's less cleanup, everything's done on the front end. There's not an issue where somebody has to call the help desk at either campus. Affiliates, affiliates, the world of exceptions. We're currently developing a sponsor system for affiliates. It will have sponsor information, contact information, reasons for them being on campus. But with affiliates, every affiliate needs something that seems a little bit different. Well, this one needs wireless access and a Google account, but they don't need access to the labs. So we're developing it to where they just check boxes of the resources they need, and that'll automatically only give them what they need. Instead of giving them access previously, we just gave them everything because we didn't have a way of refining what they would get. Now we can fine-tune the resources available to affiliates. And actually, by default now, we do not give them emails because we found the majority of affiliates didn't need our Google accounts. So we actually saved some of our licensing in provisioning Google accounts. Like I said, there's only going to be more things that come on board. You're going to have more people wanting, the better data quality you have, the more people are going to want to use it. We have an emergency management system we want to get on board. We're talking with the Blackboard people to provision their users because we have more flexibility in who can get added. Right now they're getting added from Banner. It's very restrictive. You have to have an email address. And that email address has to be one provisioned by the campus before you can be pushed over to Blackboard. They wanted a little more flexibility. We're working with them to do that. But as with everything, you learn as you go along. And Stephen's going to talk about some of the things we learned as we did this project.
So Morgan stole my thunder a little bit talking about governance. So she talked about the structure that we have for it. So when I was learning all about this 18 months or so ago, being again very new to all this space, I think I think the book I mentioned talks about having a separate governance team, but I started investigating different models for that, and University of Michigan has a lot of information, or at least had a lot of information publicly on their IT website. Excuse me. About how they structured it. And I think they mentioned the RACI model, the idea being what we ended up with was the HR, the Banner owners, the head of HR, although our SAP instance is actually run out of Knoxville, is not run off of our campus, so we share that resource. We have our head of HR as a data owner on our governance team. The senior administrator in charge of Banner is a data owner. We also have faculty representation on there, and someday we may be able to get student representation. Just haven't worked through all that. They've been very helpful to do this, and I think using them as a model of, or we're talking about attribute release. So we have a basic bucket of attributes that we will pass to downstream systems, even off-campus hosted stuff, but complying with whatever the FERPA requirements are, of course. But we have names, email addresses, the UTC ID, which is in our instance a 3-letter, 3-number identifier, so it's essentially random, and that means we also get the benefit of when people change their names, we don't have to change their identifier. So it simplifies a lot of things. But so we can pass those attributes to downstream systems by default. If a downstream system needed date of birth, if a downstream system needed something like date of birth, we would actually take that before our governance team, and they would need to approve that, and we would have to have special cases for that kind of approval and release. So lessons learned. Have multiple environments. Many institutions don't have the resources. They have production, either personnel or financial resources to have just a production resource, a production instance of everything. One of the things that makes this relatively easy is being able to virtualize everything. So we are actually at the point of almost finishing having a separate development, test, and production instances of our identity management infrastructure. From the vault, at least through Active Directory instances, we're going to have production, test, and dev identity vaults, and test and production Active Directories for our new Active Directory infrastructure, which we're building to support local needs separate from what we share with Knoxville, which will be very, very, very much handy. But one of the reasons, probably one of the important reasons to have different environments, and I'll also mention a separate quality assurance instance of the Identity Vault, is Identity Access Management has a different development lifecycle than Banner. So our goal is to have development and test environments support the identity management lifecycle of every time you bring on a new application, you have to go through a development cycle to do the connector, figure out the attributes you need, pass those attributes, do all the connections, and that's iterative on the development and test side. And if we do a QA, we would have, and in our environment, there's probably not a super heavy need for it, but having a separate QA and production in that instance would support Banner's upgrade schedule. So when they deploy to their stuff to QA, we can actually do tests when they're doing upgrades, because I think I'd mentioned this earlier, maybe before the thing, in order to do good testing, we have to impersonate all the Banner functional teams, because we need to be able to trigger attribute changes as people's roles change. So when somebody goes from somebody applying for, as a student, to being application accepted, to coming for orientation, to being a student, their attributes change in Banner, so we have to impersonate that, which I think I will talk about in a second. So multiple environments, extremely helpful. Team meetings throughout development phase. If you're doing a big bang project, This is really helpful because one of the, I think the mistakes we made is we worked with a consultant to do our project last year, and they did a lot of development. We did not, in an ongoing manner, look at the code. We waited till the end of the project, and we didn't necessarily see all the code being developed, so we don't have as good of insight waiting till the end of the project. So doing knowledge transfer and insisting from your consultants, knowledge transfer, seeing the development, doing code walkthroughs, so you understand what is changing. Version control. Version control is supported in the product we use. It allows for experimentation. It allows for better team coordination. So as Morgan and I are developing, drivers, we're not operating on the same driver, or even if we are, we take a driver or connector in different directions. We could reconverge those back to a single product output. Generate test users consistently. That's one of my peevish things. My recommendation is if you have, especially if you have multiple people, and this comes back to actually to also a matter of coding standards. So I can predict what Morgan's going to do. Morgan can predict what I'm going to do as much as possible in a given situation. So if we're generating test users, then we do test and then last name. So test leather, Stephen, et cetera, and a number. So test leather, Stephen 122, and then I could see, test Grinstead, 157, and we don't land on each other's things. And also makes for easier, you don't have to always try to invent a new wheel when developing either test data or test users. Authoritative source liaison, especially for something like Banner. If at all possible, if your Banner team can assign somebody at the early part of your project to help the identity team start understanding how Banner works, how to, what suggestion means, what Spaden means, all that kind of stuff, and help build that knowledge at the front end, it'll be extremely helpful. I'm sure there are many, many reasons why that may be difficult. Consider alternate connectors, or more to the point, consider some alternate architectures. So we have our Banner's authoritative source that we mentioned, and there is a Banner connector that connects to BEIS, Banner Enterprise Identity or Information Service. I don't know, it's BEIS. Getting data out of Banner through that, from my understanding from the Banner side, is very easy. So there's a set bucket of attributes, and adding an extension attribute is not a big deal at all. Putting data back into Banner, in our instance, our Banner team doesn't want us to, which is certainly fine, but doing that development for BEIS is much more difficult. And so my interpretation is the BEIS side of that is very inflexible. So what we will probably move to, and also for institutional reasons, what I've been thinking about is continuing to use the Banner connector outbound for data because it's easy to develop that, but then using a standard JDBC database connector for inbound stuff. So the Banner team doesn't want us to actually put data directly into the database, which is fine. But if we provide all the data that we have to them in an external table, they can query it at their leisure and use their processes, and it actually leads to a nicer decoupling there too. So if they have other things they need to process, they can do it. We just make the data available to them. Business processes and data policies. If you've never done any formal identity management, then this, I don't remember what else to say about this. They will be examined. There will need to be changes in the human layers of the technology stack. Business processes will need to change. And I think I can tell a horror story now. So last fall, got a call, and student lost access to meal plan. Bad situation. I felt that even though I'm sure they were able to eat for 3 days, I decided to interpret that as we took their food away for 3 days. And their parents were calling and all that kind of stuff. The cause of that, coming back to business processes and data policies, Over the summer, that person, that student, had been an employee for a camp. They were put into the HR system as a term employee, not a student employee. So in the fall, Banner recalculated their role and sent them back to us as an employee, and we can't give employees meal plans. So downstream from us, that student lost their meal plan. We eventually changed the roles back, and so restored everything. But that is very much how, you know, when you're doing this kind of automated processing, you know, the upstream stuff and your upstream employees, the HR team or the departments need to understand that what they're doing can affect many, many, many things. So the solution for this would have been if they had been put in the HR after the camp, they should have been either deactivated as an employee or had an expiration date or however that would work. We're still, you know, this is new for us still, so we're still working out those details. Okay, bad data will be exposed. I can give a 6 nines guarantee everybody's got bad data. Going back to the 9 different ways that we enter data into, you know, Banner, students not being required to enter a social, overlapping accounts, duplicate accounts, we just have bad data, badly spelled names, you know, middle names. Sometimes we'll have, you know, especially for, you know, Chinese names, sometimes the first 2 names will be entered as a first name, sometimes they'll be entered as a first and a middle name. Just really, really bad data, and it will be exposed. And a corollary to that is IAM should not ever be the people fixing that. If there is a bad data issue, the authoritative source needs to fix the data. We can put in certain safety checks to hopefully not take students' meal plans away. But if that's bad data, it needs to be fixed by the sources. People will want provisioning decisions that available data do not support. It's just people's expectations. Once IAM gets, you know, fairly new, some people like to say IAM, you know, can do everything. IAM can do everything. Identity management should be authoritative for some things. For instance, identity management should be, in my opinion, authoritative for, unless your business process pulls your email addresses from your authoritative sources. In our instance, we build the email addresses from data provided by our authoritative sources because we have 2 email systems. So, and as a person's, you know, role changes throughout their life cycle, their identity life cycle at the university, they could go from employee to student to employee and student, and that's going to affect whatever their primary email system is, and therefore their primary email address. So we have 2 different domains for those. Any questions? Yes, please.
Is this a full-time role for you to just manage this system? And if so, how many people do you have managing this full-time, either full-time, part-time, how many staff are involved?
Absolutely. Morgan and myself are the full-time people dedicated. I also do a lot of the access management stuff. So we have JSIG or Apereo's central authentication service. I do that. I am taking on our new Active Directory, our local Active Directory, managing that. So I'm probably, you know, 60% with identity management, 40% or so with the access management. Of course, that also goes in kind of phases because in the access management side, it seems there's no real ongoing development. It seems to be as we want to add a new access management method, such as, so we have CAS, we'll eventually have Shibboleth. So we'll be doing the SAML implementation from Shibboleth or other things. Also, you know, certain interactions with password resets and management. I'm working on a new system with that. So for those buckets of time, I need dedicated time, but most of the time I work with more on doing architecture, the identity side, because ours is still very much in flux. I was telling folks earlier, even if you use one of the big name products, there is going to be custom development just because everybody's attributes are different, everybody's business processes are different. If you don't have the resources to do this, I mentioned it earlier. Did I mention the book, InfoQ? He talks about everything in identity management being piecemeal, so you're not doing any big bang projects. Using open source tools to do the identity management, open source databases, CAS, Shibboleth, so you don't have necessarily license outlays for that. But it comes back to being a data problem and a forever service and all that kind of stuff. So does that answer your question? Okay. Anything else? Yes, sir.
So you guys implemented self-service password reset. How many people actually adopted that? How did you make sure that people actually answered building answers to stupid questions?
That's a nice pet peeve of mine. Yeah, it works well. Orientation helps it work really well. Because at orientation, people are walked through the entire process. One of the drawbacks to our particular technology is if you're going through orientation, you've never set challenge questions, you can set your challenge question page and your password page are not tied to each other. So you can set a new password and close the window and never set your challenge questions. That's kind of a problem. So we're working on actually forcing that and tying those two together somehow. We will be, once we actually get around to it, and this is a medium-term goal. Sorry. So right now also we don't have point of need password changes. So logging into CAS, you're not notified that your password is expiring. We're doing separate notifications which require people to do separate steps. So we're working towards doing point of need. So at that point, with all our connected systems, we'll actually be able to, depending on our governance team, disable access to stuff, redirect people to the CAS login page. If CAS sees that that password is expired or there are no challenge questions, it will force them to the right page. That is our goal. We're not there yet, though.
We also send out email reminders to those that haven't set up their challenge questions and answers. We actually can look at certain attributes, whether they're present or not. And when they're not present, we've started pestering those people. Hey, you need to go set these or you could possibly lose access. Granted, right now we're not actually taking things away from them, but we're making them think we can.
Yeah.
So to try and prompt them, to force them to go through and do that.
And that's an important role for the governance team, to get the buy-in and senior management to actually be able to do that, because we've never taken away resources from people. And so to talk about pestering people, we've been, that was another story, but suffice to say, people have been notified. Some people have been notified an email a week for the past 15 to 20 weeks that they need to do something. And that number keeps getting smaller and smaller. As we modify the language, then the number who do password changes and do their challenge questions goes up. Does that get your question? Okay.
How many accounts?
We have over 70,000 accounts right now. Active students, I think, are 11,000, 11,500, and about 1,200 full-time equivalent employees and staff.
And including affiliates, I'd say probably in the high teens to around 20,000 people who have, logged in the last 12 months. So that's including recent graduates, affiliates, et cetera.
One of the examples I wanted to go back to, the bad data affecting downstream systems. When we first implemented the Banner driver, we actually consumed some of the IRIS information because we hadn't connected to the IRIS. So they were sending us termination statuses. Well, the problem was they didn't have some of those updated or accurate. So we were starting to see mysteriously people couldn't log into Active Directory. Couldn't figure out why until we saw, oh, look, they're marked as expired in Banner according to those attributes. It was automatically disabling them downstream. We actually had to turn that off until we can get better data directly from our source for employees. That was one big thing that I saw right away within the first couple of weeks of implementing. So we have the deprovisioning capabilities. We want to kind of ease into it to make sure we have the data accurate from the proper sources before we get into heavy-handed deprovisioning. So.
Any questions?
I was going to pick up on the bad data because that was my question to you. Have you seen any
governance help at all with that, or have you seen any improvement when those things happen in shortening timeframes because those get all frustrating?
It's slow. It's changes in the people layer, so it's slow. As we bring more problems to the governance team, then it should get better over time, but it's just going to be slow. So that's about the best answer I can get. I don't know that we've seen anything better in the last year. Yeah, that's about the best answer I can get.
One of the things that we've kind of discovered through here was conceptually, you have authoritative sources. What we decided is actually what we're trying to work towards. We've done this with the IRIS information, the SAP instance. Have a set of attributes that only receive and are specifically for your authoritative source information. Then have some business logic driver, which we've actually started working on this. Monitor those attributes, make logic decisions, and then populate them into the shared attributes. That way you have your authoritative source information separate, and you can make your logical information decisions in a separate area, and you don't have to go to each connector and change that every time.
So, sorry, I think we're out of time. Thank you guys for coming. If you got any questions, we're going to be here for just a few more minutes. If we do some housekeeping, coffee is still available. Evaluations are available on the website. Still some Wi-Fi closing keynote, apparently at 11:10 this morning, and recordings will be available. Thank you very much.